The room was unnervingly silent, the kind of silence that seeps into your skin and stirs an inexplicable unease. Emma stood in the middle of her living room, clutching a baby blanket that still carried the faint scent of lavender and baby powder. Her heart pounded erratically, the weight of the realization pressing down on her chest like an anchor. Her baby, 6-month-old Liam, was gone. It had started as an ordinary morning. Emma, a single mother juggling 2 jobs and sleepless nights, had woken early to prepare for the day. Liam, her golden-haired bundle of joy, was still asleep in his crib, his tiny fists curled against his cheeks. She checked on him before heading to the kitchen to brew her coffee. But when she returned moments later, the crib was empty. Her first thought was that she'd missed something, that perhaps her fatigue had clouded her memory, and she'd already taken him somewhere else in the house. She tore through the rooms, calling his name even though he couldn't yet respond. The bathroom, the kitchen, the laundry room, each space echoed with absence. Panic surged through her veins like wildfire, leaving her breathless and trembling. She dialed 911 with shaking hands. The dispatcher's calm voice felt like a cruel contrast to the storm raging inside her. "My baby is gone," she stammered, her words barely coherent. "Someone took him. Please, you have to help me." The minutes felt like hours as she waited for the police to arrive. Emma's mind raced through every possible scenario. Had she locked the doors last night? Yes, she was certain she had. Was there any sign of a break-in? No shattered glass, no forced locks, nothing. It was as if Liam had vanished into thin air. The police officers arrived with an air of practiced urgency. They combed through the house, asking questions that felt both invasive and necessary. "Do you have any enemies? Someone who might want to hurt you?" one officer asked, his pen poised over a notepad. Emma shook her head, her thoughts scrambling for answers. She wasn't the kind of person to make enemies. Her life revolved around Liam and her job. There was no time for drama or disputes. But then, a name surfaced in her mind, unbidden and unwelcome. Eric. The thought hit her like a freight train. Eric, Liam's father, had resurfaced just weeks ago after abandoning her during her pregnancy. His return had been abrupt and unwelcome, filled with cryptic messages and vague promises of change. Emma had made it clear that she wanted nothing to do with him, but his insistence on seeing Liam had been unsettling. She hesitated to voice her suspicion, fear gnawing at her resolve. Could he really be capable of something like this? Taking Liam out of some misguided attempt to assert his rights as a father? I think I know who might have taken him," Emma finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. "Who?" one of them prompted. Emma swallowed hard, her throat dry. "His father, Eric." The investigation began in earnest, with the police questioning Emma further about Eric and their past. She recounted the story with a mix of bitterness and despair. How he'd walked out the moment he learned she was pregnant. How he hadn't so much as called until Liam was already 6 months old. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, jolting her from her thoughts. A text message. Emma's heart leapt into her throat as she grabbed the phone. The message was from an unknown number. "Liam is safe. Stop the police, or you'll regret it." Her vision blurred as she stared at the words, the blanket still clutched in her hands. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. Whoever had taken her baby wasn't just after Liam. They were trying to control her. And they knew she'd called the police. Emma knew one thing for certain. Whoever was behind this was watching her. Emma's hands trembled as she reread the text, her mind racing. The words on the screen blurred, and the sharp sting of panic settled deep in her chest. "Liam is safe. Stop the police, or you'll regret it." She looked around the room, her paranoia growing. The curtains felt too open, the shadows in the corners too dark. Was someone outside, watching her? Was there a camera hidden somewhere in the house? Her immediate instinct was to alert the officers, but the text's threat held her back. She gripped her phone tightly, trying to think. If she stopped cooperating with the police, she'd lose her best chance at finding Liam. But if she didn't, whoever sent the message might follow through on their threat. The officer nearest to her, a woman named Detective Harper, noticed her distress. "Emma, are you all right?" she asked, her voice calm but probing. Emma hesitated, debating whether to share the message. Harper's piercing gaze told her the detective wouldn't miss even the smallest lie. I just remembered something," Emma stammered, deciding to stall for time. She needed to figure out her next move without tipping her hand. "Eric sent me some messages a few days ago. I ignored them, but maybe he was warning me about this." Harper frowned, pulling out her notepad. "Can you show me those messages? Anything you have could help." Emma nodded, feigning compliance. "I'll look for them," she said, though her stomach churned at the lie. She turned her back to the officers, pretending to scroll through her phone. Her fingers hovered over the text from the unknown number. What was she supposed to do? In the quiet moments of false searching, Emma's thoughts drifted back to her last interaction with Eric. It was at a small cafe on the edge of town. He'd called her out of the blue, begging for a chance to talk. Against her better judgment, she'd agreed. He looked rough, she remembered. Unkempt hair, sunken eyes, and a nervous energy that made her uncomfortable. He'd gone on about wanting to be a part of Liam's life, throwing around phrases like a fresh start and making amends. She hadn't believed a word of it. "You don't get to walk back into my life like nothing happened," she told him, her voice cold and unyielding. "You abandoned us, Eric. You don't get to play dad now just because it's convenient for you." He'd clenched his jaw, his fists tightening around the coffee cup. "You think I don't regret it? You think it was easy for me to leave?" His voice had risen, drawing the attention of nearby patrons. "I didn't have a choice, Emma. You don't know what I was dealing with. And I don't care," she'd snapped, standing up to leave. "Stay away from me. Stay away from Liam." The memory made her shudder. Could Eric have taken Liam out of spite? Or was there something deeper at play? The officers were still moving through the house, cataloging evidence and asking questions. Detective Harper returned, her expression tinged with concern. "Emma, do you think Eric is capable of this? Taking Liam, I don't know," Emma admitted, her voice breaking. "He's unpredictable. He's desperate." She stopped short of mentioning the text message. Harper nodded, jotting down notes. "We'll bring him in for questioning. In the meantime, if you remember anything else, let us know immediately." When the officers finally left, the silence in the house was deafening. Emma locked the doors and windows, drawing the curtains tightly shut. She sat on the couch, staring at the text message. Whoever sent it clearly had the upper hand. They knew she'd called the police. They knew her every move. Her phone buzzed again, making her jump. Another message from the unknown number. "I warned you. Stop the police, or you'll never see him again." Her blood ran cold. Before she could respond, the phone rang. It was an unlisted number. Her thumb hovered over the screen, dread pooling in her stomach. She answered, her voice trembling. "Hello." A distorted voice crackled on the other end. "You didn't listen," it said. The tone was flat, mechanical, and void of emotion. "Now you'll pay the price." "Who are you? What do you want?" Emma demanded, her desperation mounting. "I want you to follow instructions," the voice replied. "If you do exactly as I say, you'll get your baby back. If you don't, you'll lose him forever." Emma's breath hitched. "Please, just tell me where he is. I'll do whatever you want." "You've already made one mistake by involving the police," the voice said. "You don't get another." The call ended abruptly, leaving Emma in stunned silence. Hours passed as Emma sat on the couch, her mind cycling through fear, guilt, and determination. She needed a plan. The police might have been her safest option, but now she was on her own. She pulled out a notebook and started jotting down everything she knew. 1. Eric was a possible suspect. He had motive given their strained history. 2. The messages were sent from a burner phone. Whoever was behind this was careful. 3. There was no sign of a break-in. The person had access to her home or knew how to enter without leaving a trace. She circled the third point. Someone had been in her house, maybe even someone she knew. Her thoughts were interrupted by another text. Go to the old warehouse on 5th and Pine. Alone. Midnight. No police. Her pulse quickened. The warehouse district was known for its seedy reputation. Abandoned buildings, graffiti-covered walls, and the occasional criminal activity. It was the last place she wanted to go. But what choice did she have? As midnight approached, Emma steeled herself. She dressed in dark clothes and slipped a small pocket knife into her jacket. It wasn't much, but it gave her a sense of control. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. Not even the police. The streets were eerily quiet as she drove to the warehouse. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white. When she arrived, the building loomed before her, its broken windows and rusted exterior adding to the sense of foreboding. She parked a block away and approached on foot, her heart pounding in her chest. The air was thick with tension, every sound amplified in the stillness. The warehouse door creaked as she pushed it open, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. Inside, shadows danced across the walls, and the faint smell of dampness hung in the air. "Hello?" she called, her voice trembling. "I'm here. Where's my baby?" A figure emerged from the shadows, their face obscured by a hood. In their arms was a small bundle wrapped in a blanket. "Liam," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. The figure held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "Not so fast," they said, their voice low and menacing. "We need to talk." Emma's stomach churned as she realized the nightmare was far from over. Emma froze, her heart caught between hope and terror. The hooded figure stood in the dim light, the faint outlines of Liam's blanket-clad form visible in their arms. Every fiber of her being urged her to rush forward, to grab her baby and run, but the tension in the air pinned her in place. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "He's just a baby. Please, let him go." The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, they paced slowly, their movements deliberate and unsettling. The rhythmic sound of their boots on the cracked concrete floor echoed around the warehouse. Finally, they spoke, their voice sharp but eerily calm. "This isn't about him, Emma. It's about you." The words sent a chill down her spine. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "If this is about me, then take it out on me. But please, please don't hurt him." The figure tilted their head, as if considering her plea. "You've always been so good at playing the victim," they said, their tone dripping with disdain. "But have you ever stopped to think about the damage you've caused? The lives you've destroyed?" Emma's mind raced. What were they talking about? What could she possibly have done to deserve this? "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, desperation seeping into her voice. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The figure stepped closer, and Emma instinctively took a step back. Their face remained hidden, but there was something unnervingly familiar about their stance, their voice, their presence. "You really don't remember, do you?" they said, almost mockingly. "Typical. You move on with your perfect little life, and everyone else is left to pick up the pieces." The words hung heavy in the air, and Emma's mind spiraled. Was this about Eric? Had he orchestrated this as some kind of revenge? Or was it someone else? Someone from her past she'd wronged without even realizing it? "I swear, I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice cracking. "But whatever it is, we can talk about it. Just let me hold my baby." The figure let out a bitter laugh. "Talk? Now you want to talk?" They shook their head. It's too late for that, Emma. Too late to undo what you've done. Emma's knees threatened to buckle under the weight of their words. She clung to the faint hope that this was all some terrible mistake, that she could reason with them, appeal to whatever shred of humanity they had left. If I've hurt you somehow, I'm sorry, she said, tears streaming down her face. But please, don't let my baby pay for my mistakes. The figure turned away, their grip tightening on Liam. The sight made Emma's chest ache. She could hear Liam whimpering softly, his little cries muffled but unmistakable. It took everything in her not to run to him, but she knew one wrong move could cost her everything. The figure finally stopped pacing, standing in the center of the warehouse. You want answers? They said. Fine. Let's talk about Eric. The mention of his name made Emma's stomach drop. What about him? She asked cautiously. He wasn't the monster you made him out to be, the figure said sharply. Did he make mistakes? Yes. But you ruined him. You took his son away, and you never looked back. Emma's jaw clenched. Eric abandoned us, she said, her voice rising despite herself. He didn't want to be a father. He didn't want to take responsibility. Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? The figure shot back. He loved Liam. He wanted to be there for him, but you wouldn't let him. You pushed him away, Emma. You made sure he couldn't come back. The accusation stung, but Emma refused to back down. You don't know what you're talking about, she said fiercely. You don't know what it was like to live with him, to watch him spiral out of control. I did what I had to do to protect my son. The figure let out another bitter laugh. Protect him? Is that what you think you're doing now? They gestured toward Liam, their movements sharp and accusatory. Do you even realize how much danger he's in because of you? Emma's breath caught. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You've made enemies, Emma. Powerful ones. People who won't stop until they've taken everything from you. You thought you could keep Liam safe by running away, but you've only made things worse. The revelation hit her like a freight train. Could it be true? Had her attempts to shield Liam inadvertently put him in harm's way? Her mind flashed back to the strange phone calls, the suspicious cars parked near her house, the uneasy feeling that had followed her for weeks. She dismissed it all as paranoia, but now it felt like the pieces were falling into place. Who are you working for? She demanded, her voice shaking. What do they want from me? The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, they stepped closer, closing the gap between them. Emma's pulse quickened, her instincts screaming at her to run, but she stood her ground. She wouldn't leave without her baby. They want justice, the figure said finally. Justice for Eric. Justice for everyone you've wronged. Emma's eyes widened. Eric? She repeated, her voice laced with disbelief. He's behind this? The figure shook their head. Not exactly. Eric's gone, Emma. But his death. It wasn't an accident. The words sent a chill through her. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice barely audible. You know exactly what I mean, the figure said, their tone heavy with implication. And now, it's time to face the consequences. Emma's mind reeled as she tried to process the revelation. Was it possible that Eric's death was tied to her? Had her actions set off a chain of events she couldn't control? And what would that mean for Liam? The figure took a step closer, and Emma's instincts kicked into overdrive. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to act. Please, she said, her voice breaking. You don't have to do this. I'll do whatever you want. Just let Liam go. The figure hesitated, their grip on Liam loosening ever so slightly. It was the opening Emma needed. In a flash, she lunged forward, her hand closing around the edge of the blanket. The figure stumbled back, caught off guard, and Emma used the moment to her advantage. She pulled Liam into her arms, shielding him with her body. The figure cursed, regaining their footing. You think this is over? They spat, their voice full of venom. This is just the beginning. Emma didn't wait to hear more. Clutching Liam tightly, she ran toward the exit, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound of footsteps behind her spurred her on, but she didn't dare look back. She burst through the warehouse door and into the cold night air, her lungs burning as she sprinted toward her car. She could hear the figure shouting behind her, but she didn't stop until she'd locked herself and Liam inside. As she sped away, her mind raced. The nightmare wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. But she had her baby, and she'd fight tooth and nail to keep him safe. Emma drove through the night, her hands trembling on the steering wheel as Liam's soft cries filled the car. She kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting headlights to appear and the hooded figure to reemerge. The warehouse and its horrors receded into the distance, but the fear clung to her, heavy and suffocating. She needed help, someone she could trust. But who? The police would ask questions she couldn't answer. Her friends, though well-meaning, wouldn't understand the danger she faced. There was only one person who might have answers, one person who had been entangled in the mess from the start. Eric's sister, Vanessa. Vanessa had always been wary of Emma, her loyalty to Eric unwavering even in the face of his mistakes. But Emma remembered the last time she'd spoken to Vanessa, months ago, when she'd mentioned cryptically, "If you ever find yourself in trouble, come to me." Eric wasn't the saint you thought he was, but there's more you need to know. The drive to Vanessa's house was long and grueling, the tension in the car palpable. Liam had finally fallen asleep in his car seat, his tiny body rising and falling with each breath. Emma's heart ached as she glanced at him, her resolve hardening. Whatever this was, whatever it took, she'd uncover the truth and keep him safe. By the time she pulled into Vanessa's driveway, the sun was beginning to rise, casting an eerie glow over the quiet neighborhood. Emma hesitated for a moment, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel. What if Vanessa slammed the door in her face? What if she, too, blamed Emma for everything that had happened? But she had no other options. Taking a deep breath, Emma stepped out of the car and carried Liam to the door. She knocked softly at first, then louder when no one answered. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing Vanessa, her face pale and her eyes bloodshot. "Emma," Vanessa said, her voice thick with exhaustion. "What are you doing here?" "I need your help," Emma said, her voice shaking. "Liam and we're in danger." Vanessa's expression hardened.
Danger?
"What are you talking about?" "Please," Emma pleaded. "Can we come inside? I'll explain everything." Vanessa hesitated but eventually stepped aside, motioning for Emma to enter. As Emma crossed the threshold, she felt a mix of relief and dread. She was safe for now, but she knew the hardest part was yet to come. Inside, Vanessa led Emma to the living room and offered her a seat. The room was cluttered, papers and books scattered across the coffee table. Vanessa sat across from her, crossing her arms. "Start talking," she said, her tone sharp. "What's going on?" Emma recounted everything. The mysterious figure, the kidnapping, the accusations about Eric. Vanessa listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When Emma finished, Vanessa leaned back, letting out a long sigh. "I warned you, Emma," Vanessa said finally. "I told you there were things about Eric you didn't know, but you didn't want to hear it." "I didn't think it would come to this," Emma said, her voice breaking. "I didn't think someone would take my baby." Vanessa shook her head. "It's not just about Liam. This goes deeper than you realize." Emma leaned forward, her desperation mounting. "Then tell me, what is it? Who's behind this?" Vanessa hesitated, her gaze flickering to the pile of papers on the coffee table. Finally, she picked up a folder and handed it to Emma. "It's all in here," she said. "Eric was involved in some shady business before he died. He made enemies, dangerous ones. And when he died, they didn't just disappear." Emma opened the folder, her hands shaking as she flipped through the pages. Inside were documents, photographs, and newspaper clippings. One photo caught her eye. A grainy image of Eric standing with a group of men, their faces partially obscured. In the corner of the photo was a familiar figure, the hooded person from the warehouse. "Who is this?" Emma asked, pointing to the figure. Vanessa's face darkened. "That's Marcus," she said. "He was one of Eric's closest friends, until they had a falling out. After Eric died, Marcus blamed you for everything. He thinks you're the reason Eric's life fell apart." Emma's stomach churned. "But why would he come after Liam?" "Because Liam is Eric's legacy," Vanessa said. "And Marcus thinks taking Liam will somehow make things right. He's twisted, Emma. He's not going to stop until he gets what he wants." Emma's mind raced as she processed Vanessa's words. Marcus. The name felt heavy, ominous. She thought back to the warehouse, to the venom in the figure's voice. It all made sense now. The accusations, the anger, the fixation on Eric. "What do I do?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do I stop him?" Vanessa leaned forward, her expression grave. "You can't fight him alone. Marcus has connections, resources. You need to go to the police." "They won't believe me," Emma said. "Not without proof." Vanessa nodded toward the folder. "Then use this. It's not everything, but it's enough to start. Take it to someone you trust, someone who can help." Emma looked down at the folder, the weight of its contents pressing on her. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Liam, about keeping him safe no matter the cost. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice steady. "I won't let him take my son." Vanessa nodded, a flicker of respect in her eyes. "Good," she said, "because this fight is just beginning." Emma left Vanessa's house with a newfound determination and a folder full of evidence that could expose Marcus's sinister plans. The morning sun glared through her windshield as she navigated the winding roads back toward town, her mind racing. She now knew the enemy, but understanding the danger didn't make it any less real. Marcus wasn't just a man with a vendetta. He was someone with the power and connections to ruin lives, and he had her son in his crosshairs. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat, jolting her out of her thoughts. It was a text message from an unknown number. The words made her blood run cold. "You think Vanessa can protect you? You're running out of places to hide. Hand over the boy and we'll end this cleanly. Keep fighting, and you'll regret it." Emma gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Marcus was watching her every move. She glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a car tailing her, but the road was empty. The message wasn't just a threat. It was a reminder that Marcus was always one step ahead. Emma parked outside the small police precinct in her town, her heart pounding. She clutched the folder like a lifeline, the weight of its contents feeling both empowering and suffocating. As she stepped inside, the sterile smell of the building and the fluorescent lights overhead made her feel exposed, vulnerable. She approached the front desk, where a young officer glanced up from his paperwork. "I need to speak to someone about a kidnapping," Emma said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The officer frowned but nodded, motioning for her to take a seat. Moments later, a middle-aged detective with a weary expression appeared. He introduced himself as Detective Harris and led her into a small, cluttered office. "Tell me what's going on," he said, sitting behind the desk. His tone was skeptical but not dismissive. Emma took a deep breath and began recounting everything: Marcus, the warehouse, the threats, the connection to Eric. She laid the folder on his desk, opening it to the photograph of Marcus and Eric. Detective Harris's expression shifted as he scanned the documents, his initial skepticism giving way to concern. "This is serious," he said finally, leaning back in his chair. "If what you're saying is true, Marcus is more than just a disgruntled associate. He's a criminal with a network that spans multiple cities. But we'll need more than this to bring him in." Emma's stomach sank. "What more do you need?" "He's threatened me," taken my child. What else do you need to stop him? We need direct evidence tying him to the threats and the kidnapping, Harris said. Phone records, witnesses, something concrete. Emma's mind raced. She thought about the hooded figure at the warehouse, the chilling voice on the phone. There had to be a way to lure Marcus out into the open, to force him to reveal his hand. What if I can get him to confess? She asked, her voice tinged with desperation. What if I can prove he's behind this? Harris hesitated. That's dangerous, Miss Carter. If Marcus is as dangerous as you say, confronting him could put both you and your son in more danger. Emma met his gaze, her eyes blazing with determination. I don't have a choice. He's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. And I'm not going to let him take my son. That evening, Emma sat in her car outside a seedy motel on the edge of town, her phone in her lap. She had texted Marcus from a burner phone she had picked up earlier, crafting a message that would hopefully draw him out. You want to talk? Fine. Meet me at the old railway station tonight. Come alone. Her plan was risky, borderline reckless, but it was the only way she could see to get Marcus to reveal himself. She had alerted Detective Harris, who had reluctantly agreed to position officers nearby in case things went south. But the thought of relying on anyone else left Emma uneasy. She had learned the hard way that trust was a fragile thing. As the hours ticked by, Emma's anxiety grew. Liam's small face flashed in her mind, his innocent eyes brimming with trust. She clung to the hope that this gamble would pay off, that she could end this nightmare and bring her son home. When Marcus's response finally came, Emma's hands trembled as she read the words. I'll be there, but you'd better not be playing games, Emma. The time was set for midnight. Emma steeled herself, her resolve firm despite the fear gnawing at her. This was it, the moment everything would come to a head. She didn't know what awaited her at the railway station, but one thing was certain. She wasn't leaving without her son. The old railway station was shrouded in darkness, the dim moonlight casting eerie shadows on the crumbling walls. Emma's car was parked a short distance away, hidden behind a cluster of overgrown bushes. She stepped out cautiously, her heart pounding like a war drum. In her pocket, she clutched a small audio recorder, the device Detective Harris had given her. The station's platform stretched out before her like a ghost of the past, littered with rusted tracks and broken debris. Every creak of the wind sounded like footsteps. Every flicker of shadow seemed to move with malicious intent. And then, a figure emerged from the darkness. Marcus. He was tall and imposing, his face partially obscured by the low brim of his cap. In his hand he held a black duffel bag. Emma could see the arrogance in his stride, the confidence of a man who believed he held all the power. You're braver than I thought, Marcus said, his voice smooth but laced with venom. Coming here alone? Bold move, Emma. Emma didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her chin held high. Where's my son? Marcus smirked. Safe for now. But that depends on you. You've been making this much harder than it needs to be. He dropped the duffel bag on the ground and unzipped it, revealing stacks of cash and a small handgun. Here's the deal, he continued. You sign over full custody to me and disappear. Take the money, start a new life, and I'll make sure your boy never has to know what a mess you made of things. Emma's hands clenched into fists. You think you can buy me off? That I'd ever abandon Liam? Marcus's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. Don't be stupid, Emma. You've already lost. The courts are in my pocket, and the cops, they'll never touch me. You're fighting a battle you can't win. Emma's mind raced. She needed Marcus to incriminate himself, to admit the full extent of his crimes. She reached into her jacket, pretending to consider his offer, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Fine, she said, her voice trembling just enough to seem genuine. But I want it in writing. A signed guarantee that you'll leave us alone after this. Marcus chuckled. You're more desperate than I thought. He reached for the paper, But as he leaned closer, Emma pressed a button on the recorder in her pocket. "Admit it," she said, her tone sharp. "Admit what you've done, everything. Or I walk out of here, and you'll never see Liam again." Marcus's face darkened. "You think you're in control here?" he hissed. "Fine. You want to hear it? I paid off the judge, the lawyers, everyone who stood in my way. I took Liam because I could, because you're weak, Emma. And if you cross me again, you'll regret it." The recorder captured every word. Before Marcus could react, the sound of tires screeching broke through the silence. Red and blue lights flooded the station as unmarked police cars surrounded them. Officers poured out, weapons drawn. "Marcus Hale, you're under arrest." Detective Harris's voice boomed. Marcus spun around, his face a mask of shock and rage. "You set me up," he snarled at Emma. Emma stepped back, her heart pounding as officers swarmed Marcus, wresting the gun from his grip and slapping handcuffs on his wrists. "You'll pay for this, Emma," Marcus shouted as he was dragged toward a police car. "You think this is over? It's never over." Emma stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat as the chaos unfolded around her. And then, a voice called out. A small, frightened voice that made her knees buckle. "Mommy!" She turned to see Liam, his tear-streaked face peeking out from the back seat of one of the unmarked cars. She ran to him, pulling him into her arms, holding him as though she'd never let go. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, her tears soaking his hair. "You're safe now."